Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. I love finishing off a 6x6 paper pad completely, but sometimes I have a project where I only make a few cards and then I end up with a ton of scraps. This year I thought I would focus on some of those partially used 6x6 paper pads. I recently received a request from a local charity that needs more birthday and general theme cards, and they really want them to be gender neutral. So I was searching through my partially used collections and I came across Paper Rose's Mini Adventure. This is perfect for masculine or feminine cards. I still have 6 full sheets of paper and then lots of scraps. So now it's time to turn this paper into a set of cards. Last year I used this collection and I made 6 cards. Here's a look at them. I did make 2 of each. I really like the colors and designs in this collection, and it's easy to add an image or sentiment to complement the papers. For card design number 1, I am using a card sketch for inspiration. This is from MFT. It's number 582. I selected 3 different pattern papers. I have the grid paper for the background, the larger rectangle, it's that lighter blue with the white polka dots. And then for the banner that goes behind that light blue paper, this is a dark blue geometric pattern. So I just cut a fishtail on the right side. I'll put some ATG tape on the back of this piece and layer it on some dark blue cardstock. All of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. I will be keeping all of these cards fairly simple and also flat, so I'm not adding any extra bling. Since they are going to a charity that will be mailing them out, I don't want them to have to pay any extra postage. Before adhering this light blue piece, I am adding some scrap cardstock above and below that banner. That way everything will be at the same level. I'll just adhere that in place using some liquid adhesive. Now I will be changing this sketch. I'm adding a stitched oval die cut instead of that second banner. It's the fun thing about sketches. You can follow them exactly or just use them for inspiration. I used the same dark blue cardstock and cut out the baby blue small eucalyptus branch die cut. And I'll just adhere that in place with some liquid adhesive. I'm adding the sentiment hello, and I cut this out from some blue satin mirror cardstock. This is part of the Hugs, Thanks, Hello Chunky Script die set. It's one of my favorites. I love having those nice general sentiments. And there is my finished card. I made 2 similar in the blue design, and then I made 4 with the green and yellow pattern papers. If you're not restricted with dimension, you could easily add some bling or even pop up the sentiment. But this will be perfect for the charity that needs the general sentiment cards. For card design number 2, the card sketch is from OWH. This is number 219. And if you are interested in any of the card sketches I use in this video, I do share all of that information on my coordinating blog post. That link is provided in the description box below, or you can simply head over to kristiemarcotte.com. This is a great sketch if you don't have full sheets of 6x6 paper, but you still have lots of these wider strips, since the widest piece on here is 2½ inches. I selected 2 different pattern papers. I have the green for that larger piece and that blue geometric for the bottom piece. Layering everything on some dark blue cardstock, and for the very background I used some white shimmer cardstock. And I decided to use the solid blue cardstock for that 3/8 inch strip rather than bring in more pattern paper. Now again, I will be changing this sketch. Instead of the circle, I'll be adding an oval. And I used Paper Rose's stitched oval die set, and this oval I also cut out from some of the white shimmer cardstock. With this sketch, all of the cards will be birthday cards. I'm using the present die set. This is the largest gift and it has this fun stitch diagonal stripe detail. Use some solid green cardstock for the main present and then the dark blue cardstock for the bow. I'll just adhere those onto that oval die cut. For the happy birthday sentiment, I'm using one of Paper Rose's sentiment sheets. This is their all occasion set. These are great if you just need to grab a quick sentiment and don't feel like stamping. The all occasion set really has a nice variety of sentiments, and Paper Rose does have some other sentiment cut apart sheets as well. So there is my finished card, and I did make a total of 5. I just used different pattern paper for the other 4 cards. This set of cards may not have any bling, but there are quite a few layers. I think at some point there's a total of 9 layers of cardstock. With all of those layers, it's a nice and sturdy card, but without adding the bling and the foam dimension, it's still flat enough to mail without paying any additional postage. For card design number 3, I have 2 strips of this green and white striped pattern paper. They're just under 2 inches. So I decided to add them to some green cardstock. You can see just a very narrow gap between those 2 pieces. And I did try to line them up to make them look like one full sheet. I'll put some ATG tape on the back of this piece and add my card front onto a card base. To cover up that gap, I'm adding a strip of pattern paper. This is a fun chevron design. Almost looks like it was hand drawn. So it has a few different colors. And I did layer that strip on some dark blue cardstock. Next, I'll add a stitched oval die cut, and I use Paper Rose's Watercolour Whimsy paper pack. The colors in that collection match beautifully with the Mini Adventure collection. Just for some extra stability, I cut out a second oval from some white cardstock and just glued those 2 pieces together. Now before I adhere the oval onto the card, I will add some scrap cardstock on the upper portion of the oval. Just need a small piece. I want to keep everything nice and level. So I'll just glue that in place using some liquid adhesive. I love the look of the watercolor paper. It's perfect for adding a sentiment or an image. Now I'll be adding a die cut sentiment. I have the word hello, and I also have the outline for it. Now for the outline, I use that same blue watercolor pattern paper. So I'll glue those 2 pieces together. And since I am still trying to keep these fairly flat, I won't pop up this sentiment. So I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to the card. So even though the outline and the oval are the same pattern paper, since the design is slightly different, you can see the definition between the 2. For embellishments on the card, I'll be adding some stars. These are the stitched star die cuts. I cut them all out from some dark blue cardstock, and then I cut a second small star from the green cardstock, and I just layered that large star with the 2 colors. I'll put 2 of the stars in the upper left-hand corner and 1 in the lower right-hand corner. Since 2 points of the large star are sitting on top of the oval, I want to keep it nice and level. I was trying to add some scrap cardstock on the back, but it wasn't quite thick enough. So I am using some foam dimension, but this is very thin foam dimension. There is my finished card. I only had enough scraps to make 1 card using this design. At this point, I mostly have thin strips of pattern paper and also some small little rectangle pieces. So I decided to pull out Paper Rose's Layering Chevrons Border die set. There are 3 different dies, and I love how 2 of them have this fun stitch detail in the center. I have 6 different chevron pieces, cut out 4 of them from pattern paper, and then the 2 narrow pieces I used some dark blue cardstock. For the background, I used some white shimmer cardstock and cut out the panel using a pierced rectangle die. Now I'm just putting liquid adhesive on the back of these chevron die cut pieces and adhering them to the white cardstock panel. And I do have the very ends going off the edge, but that's okay. I will trim those off here shortly. I'm alternating the patterns and size of the chevron pieces and then mixing in some of that solid blue cardstock. This is such a fun set. You can add all those pieces together so there isn't a gap between them, but I decided for my card to have some of that white shimmer cardstock showing through between those chevron pieces. So I'm down to 2 final pieces. I'll add the dark blue next. The final chevron piece is a light blue with white polka dots, but it's not quite long enough for this panel. some of the scraps I had left over aren't the full 6 inches. So I decided just to pass on that one and go with the 5 different chevron pieces. I did end up with some glue all over my craft mat, so I just wiped that off. Then I flipped over this panel and I'm using my scissors to trim off the extra. I'll be layering this piece on some of the blue Watercolor Whimsy pattern paper. I put some ATG tape on the back, but I'm also adding some liquid adhesive along the very outside edge since this piece does have that pierced detail. It'll just make sure that all those edges lay down flat. Then I layered that panel on some dark blue cardstock, put my card front onto a card base. I love the look of the pattern paper with the chevron dies. It's so fun. You could create a fun background panel using the chevron die cuts and different pattern papers. Now I'll be adding a few flower die cuts. This is one of my favorite flower sets from Paper Rose. It's the Alana Flower. There's several different pieces, so you could make a fairly large flower. I'll be adding a medium size and also 2 small flowers to my card. And I decided just to go with some yellow cardstock for all 3 flowers. For the medium flower, I cut out 2 pieces for the background, and then I have the smaller piece to layer on top. And then the 2 smaller, I just have those 2 petal pieces. Use some of the white shimmer cardstock for the very center of each of the flowers. The sentiment, I've already stamped this out. This is from Paper Rose's Happy Birthday mini stamp set. I stamped it on some white cardstock, then I'll cut a fishtail on both ends. And there's just enough room above those chevrons to add the sentiment. Put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere that in place, trying to make sure to get it nice and centered. Then for the flowers, I'll start with that medium size, add it to the very center, and then put the smaller flowers on the right and left side. And I'll glue all of those down using some liquid adhesive. And if I wasn't donating these to charity, I would probably pop those up with some foam dimension. And there is my finished card. I love the colors on this one. I was able to make 2 cards using this design. For the second card, I used some of the orange and blue pattern paper, and the flowers, I used the Watercolor Whimsy orange pattern paper. I love how the petals have a mix of the dark orange and the soft orange. For card design number 5, I'm down to just some small pattern paper scraps. I'm starting with some white cardstock. I used a pierced rectangle die to cut that out, gluing it onto my card base. This is a very, very simple card design. I cut out 5 different triangles using a Paper Rose triangle die set. And I'm just adding them to the background, trying to figure out a good pattern for them. So I used the same size triangle for those smaller pieces and then 3 different sizes for the other pieces. So once I have a layout that I like, I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere them to the card. Trying to make sure to get that first triangle nice and straight. If you get the first one straight, then it's easy to line up the rest. So now I'll add the yellow. I have the light blue with the white polka dots that'll go to the right of the yellow. Try to figure out what direction looks best. Then I can add the orange above the dark blue. And then finally that green, almost looks like little flowers on it. I'll be stamping the sentiment directly onto the card, so I'm using my Mini Misty, using that same Happy Birthday mini stamp set. This time, have a wonderful day. And I'll stamp it right underneath that large dark blue triangle. I do need to ink it up a few times to get a nice solid impression. Then to finish off the card, I'll use some Nuvo Crystal Drops. This is the Morning Dew color, so it's just clear. And I'll add a sprinkling of the drops around the triangles and the sentiment. So there is my finished card. I was only able to make 1 since at this point I'm almost out of pattern paper scraps. Here's a look at all the pattern paper scraps I do have left over, just 5 small pieces. This is a great collection. You can use it for most card themes, and it's perfect for masculine or feminine cards. Now here's another look at the additional 15 cards I made using Paper Rose's Mini Adventure 6x6 paper collection. Last year I made 6 cards, and now with the additional 15 cards, I made a total of 21 cards using this collection. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links provided in the description box below. Paper Rose is located in Australia, and they do ship their products internationally, but you can also purchase them here in the US, and I do have links for both locations provided in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.